Hi, I'm Allison Morris, and you're watching Bowen TV.
Let the people be the judge. See, the people are represented by government, but government doesn't really do what people need. You see, because obviously people need housing. Has government looked after housing? No. No, Joe. No. So that's what it is. So when you get in politics, there are so many forces at play, and ultimately the politicians will constantly look over their shoulder and say, well, how do I look right now? Right now. Not how may I be looked at in 10 years. No, it's always the now. And that does not create great leadership. So that's unfortunate. So empower the people. I may sound like a revolutionary, but that's what it is.
What I wanted to talk about was what council is and isn't doing. And
specifically with housing.
Yeah, to do with affordable housing. And you know, if you look back in the books, if you look at the OCP, there's all kinds of nice language that talks about our commitment to diversity of housing options and all that kind of stuff. And it's just that, it's words. Unless it's backed up with some policy, all it says is we think it'd be a great thing if we had better housing options for people, particularly for people with limited economic means. So obviously that's not good enough. It sets a tone, but it's like having a tract on homelessness and it doesn't get people off the street. So that's sort of the first level of what council has in its arsenal. When you look at that as a reference document and you say, okay, we're going to amend our land use bylaw, and this happened with Snug Cove, for example. We essentially put in this idea of density bonusing. So if you build housing which is non-traditional housing, so it's co-op housing, co-housing, you know, special needs housing, non-market, affordable, multifamily. I mean, they're all accessible. There are all these different terms which have their nuances, but essentially they refer to everything but the person going into the realtor's office and buying the house off the block. What we said was, yeah, you can raise the density. So that encourages the developer to go in and create additional housing units. So we haven't seen a lot of that, but the best early example was Wolfgang's project, you know, between the Muni Hall and the corner, where there are 12 units that went in there. They're controlled rent. They're 15% below market. They filled the day they were finished. There's obviously a huge demand. People are really pleased to live there. Because even though it's rent controlled, the land is essentially free. They got to pay for their own infrastructure to have the additional units, but it's bonus units. And the other thing is that even though they might not make a whole lot of money on the rents, in fact, they probably lose money. It probably costs them more to build it than they're returning on the rent. But you know, over 20 years, it'll pay down the mortgage, and they have an asset which is worth a bunch of money, and those rents go into their pockets or their children's pockets. So there is incentive to build stuff even when it is below market. Obviously not the same incentive as building market housing. So that whole thing of amenity zoning and encouraging builders to come forward and do projects like that works, and I think it will continue to work. I think it'll be more than we've got now. What I think personally is we need a lot more affordable housing. I mean, we're seeing it. We just lost Mara and Stu. I think that there are incredible new manufactured homes that are coming out that are cheap, 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 and really the impediment to it is our land use bylaw, which says, no, you can't put 20 units on a 5-acre chunk. in the middle of the valley somewhere. And there's one particular location which is belongs to a woman who wants to go ahead on something like that. It's on a slope, it's north slope, it's got nice views, but it doesn't have great light. But it's steep enough that you actually can terrace the whole thing, and you could put housing on each level on both sides of the road, and you'd be looking, everybody would have a view, and you'd have a little bit of a front yard, and you'd have considerable privacy. I would actually love to rezone that and permit her to do that. I just think that it would be a great experiment. So I looked into places like Salt Spring Island, which I thought didn't have trailer parks, and they have 2 of them, and they've been there a long time, and it works fine. There's nothing in the Islands Trust Act or the policy statements that says you can't do that. The impediment is local. So as a policy, we should lift that because it's pretty clear now that we need to have that form of housing available. And manufactured homes are still 60, 80 bucks a square foot, 100 bucks a square foot. So you can get a 800 square foot decent unit for $65,000 to $90,000, and you stick that on a pad. And the problem, the real problem with trailer parks has been, and that was the case in Ladysmith, where people just got evicted, and all the way up the valley, is that people own their mobile home, but they don't own the pad. They're renting, and so they're at the mercy of people, of landlords. If they actually had either a strata or freehold on their property, it's just another form of housing. They have the same assurance, they have the same commitment, and they have the possibility to make money on it when they sell. So I'm totally in favor of that now. I know that this year we're not going to get into a discussion on changing the land use bylaw and the OCP to permit that, but what is on the horizon is a full OCP review, and that can be a bit of a groaner. It can be something that stalls everything for years. But if you break it down into pieces, and the very first thing that I would look at is residential housing policy. So when you look at that, you get some recommendations out of that, and you say, okay, let's amend that section, and let's just it really is insertion of a few words that permits that. And as soon as you trigger that, and it goes through the process, which takes a few months, then you can say, yes, we now have, as part of our community document says that we're encouraging that kind of housing form. And then the rest of it is you invite application. The housing crisis will ease when the economy goes down. It'll just do that. The long term, I'm quite optimistic that we're going to have more housing form. I think that the secondary suite thing is absolutely enormous. There are 1,800, 2,000 potential units out there. So maybe 500 of them get built. We have that. That's going to make a big dent. Bowen, I think our population is going to creep up fairly steadily, and then it'll level out in 20, 30 years. I mean, I don't know how I can say that, but I just think that the infill, as long as there's the Islands Trust and there's regulation in a sense that we shouldn't just be nuking more areas and putting in more housing everywhere, that I think that the amount will stabilize. So I think that we're going to have a community of 8,000 to 10,000 people here in 25 years.